Hello, friends and neighbors of the world. This is a 60 by 30 canvas. I think it's the biggest one I've ever painted on. With this massive size, I just kind of leaned into the way I used to paint a long time ago, where I was just blocking color to get the basic shapes. Nothing really defined necessarily. The shapes that I'm looking for without spending a lot of time with it, and it's still very wet, so I can go back over it the following day and still be able to play with it a lot more. This is just the easiest way that I've ever found, the quickest way I've ever found too, to keep things moving. When you still have a day job and still want to paint, I think this, for me, this is the fastest method I've ever had to where I can still do what I want as far as painting and still have time to do it. You know, is just to go fast and knock it out. And it's served me well in a lot of ways to where, like, I have had shows where I've needed to get things done really fast, and this is probably the fastest method I've ever learned how to do it. It was just heavy paint, but still looks really soft and refined in a lot of ways. It's just fast. And this one I really wanted to push the background objects further. So I definitely wanted to soften their edges and kind of play with where it stops and where it ends, you know, so it doesn't really have a solid defined line. You know, I'll even kind of jump over, like paint outside the lines necessarily to kind of push it back further. I spent a lot of time on certain parts of this to really push it back, like the anything that was further back, I really wanted to soften all those edges and kind of dance around where the image should have ended, but still have a few like highlights and dark areas that were not necessarily connected to the object anymore. It really pushed it back further, because your eye just kind of plays with it and kind of puts it together. You know, that it seemed to help in that regard for that. And with this particular method, I'm not even really cleaning my brushes off from color to color either. I think that helps too, to blend things. Just having like just a muddy, dirty old brush that just hadn't been washed out that much. You know, I might wipe off the excess paint that I'm not using, but as far as trying to clean the brush completely, I haven't really bothered too much with it during this painting. It flows better in a way. With not cleaning the brush off, it helps with reflective light for me, because everything reflects light from each other. Like, all, you know, colors bounce from object to object, and it changes the hues from this, that, and the other. And by not cleaning the brush, it really leans into that, to where those extra colors from the previous part that I was painting, it just dances back over to something else. It helps with the blending and keeping everything grounded to where everything is reflective off of one another. This being from Canada and from the Quebec region, originating in the 1950s. It made me think of this brother and sister that I knew who are Canadian. Several years ago, while working in restaurants, they were both deaf. The sister was partially deaf, and she could, you know, hear pretty well with hearing aids. But I was just like, after knowing them for a while, and you know, started asking questions, you know, because I haven't really met too many deaf people in my life. But you know, she was very receptive and understanding. That, you know, no malice, just curious. You know, And there was one particular time where several of us, after work, we were just kind of sitting out on the patio talking about the day that we just had, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent. And the mother of the death girl pulls up, parked maybe 15, 20 feet from the patio, and the daughter stood up and she started doing sign language, and the mother, replied in sign language, and it was just fascinating because I felt like if they had been hearing people, they would have yelled back and forth several times, repeating themselves, and eventually one of them would have had to walk over to the other to understand what they wanted from one another as far as the conversation was concerned. And it was just really amazing to see that it wasn't necessary for them, that they could have this whole conversation and then the mother just drove off. Whatever, I don't remember what they said, but they just had this conversation, and the mother drove off. And I was just fascinated by it. I feel like that's something that we should all kind of know, that it just saved so much time, that they were, you know, they didn't have to walk over to one another. They didn't have to do any of these things that hearing people would probably done, and the conversation was ended without the constant repeating of what, none of that stuff. It was just great. The girl, after they had been in the U.S. for a while, and they, ordering pizza, and from one of the big, pizza chains, that we all know of. She was looking at the menu, and she saw where it had Canadian bacon. She just kind of laughed, like, "What's Canadian bacon?" And so she was like, "All right, I've never heard of that, so I'll order that and get it on get it on the pizza that they ordered." And going to find out it was just ham. She was so disappointed, thinking she was going to get something special. So one night I get out of work relatively early for me at that particular time, and I saw her brother, um, a couple paces, ahead of me, and I yell his name a few times, and he doesn't turn around, and I yell it again, and I try to walk faster to catch up with him, and he's walking pretty fast, and he gets away, and I go to work the following day, and I see his sister, and I tell her, like, I saw your brother the other night, and I was yelling his name, and she just kind of stopped and looked at me like, "You were yelling his name?" I'm like, "Yeah." She was like, "You were yelling his name. He can't hear." Like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm such a dummy." Oh, I just wanted to show you how ratty that brush is that I use to blend colors. It's beat up. It's so old. Like, it's stiff, but that's what makes it so good. All the bristles are just kind of matted, but it still like pushes that paint around really well. Ten through 15, I didn't really record anything. I just, I don't know, I felt like it was something I want to keep for myself and just enjoyed my time alone without having to play with the cameras and the lights and the microphones and all that other stuff. I just felt nice just to paint.